So happy to be joined on this segment by a man we've been fortunate to have the last several years on these Monster Pods and elsewhere on the In the Money Media Network. A man I'm proud to call a colleague at Sky Sports Racing, and you know him from many other venues as well. If your eyes are open and you follow horse racing, he's MC Yeehaw himself, Matt Chapman. What's up, Matt?
Yeehaw! Peter, great to see you. I know you're not at the Breeders' Cup this time around, and it's kind of not the Breeders' Cup without Peter Fornatale, to be quite frank, but we're going to try and make the most of it, and I'm looking forward to, because I don't know, like people might think that we, have been preparing this, but I don't know what you're going to say, and I'm really interested to hear your views as well, so excited.
Let's start by talking about not the defending champion, because there was a year in between, but we do have a former champion in this race in the form of Rebels Romance. I think it's fair to say that he sets the standard in many ways. How do you evaluate? We're going to come to you at the end of the video for your official selection, but just generally speaking, how do you evaluate his chance? How is he relative to the horse we saw at the Breeders' Cup a couple of years ago?
Well, he's still right up there. I've always been a great believer in that not every horse is going to be brilliant in every country. And Rebels Romance, probably his worst country, is the country that he's trained in. But I've always thought that that's down to pace, the way races are run, etc. A lot of our horses, for instance, go off to Australia and they're not very good over here and they suddenly become champions. Via Sistina would be a classic example, who's just won the Cox Plate. And often that's because of the way the pace of the races are run in different countries. And I just think Rebels Romance is a horse that's very much favoured by the pace of races in countries away from the UK. Look, he's won it before. He stays well. He goes on any ground. He's already proven this year that he's just about as good as he's ever been. I see absolutely no reason why he won't be bang in the mix. He could have had a little bit of a better draw, like something 4 to 8 rather than 11. But at the end of the day, he's not one of those rocket bang out and make the running horses. He's not a deep closer. He's not an Arazi or something. So he's just a normal racehorse. He's kind of bomb-proof, and he'll just slot in behind the leaders. And I think he's got a great chance of being in the mix again. He's a proper Godolphin horse in that he is a globe-trotting champion.
Let's talk about some of the key opposition, and we'll start with some other horses coming from the UK. Emily Upjohn, a bit of a surprise entrant in this. John Gosden saying that he doesn't really like the mile and 3/8 configuration of the filly and mare turf, too draw dependent. He gets a cozy inside draw in this spot. Is she good enough, though?
I think she is good enough for the peak. She's about 5 pounds behind her best form, although arguably she's run 2 huge races under Kieran Schumacher this season. Look, this is a tricky one for me because I think it's really harsh on Schumacher that he's not on board. It's like Dettori and Gosden, they just can't leave each other alone. Like it's like they've been girlfriend and boyfriend and they split up, and then every 6 months they haven't found someone new and they go and have another night out, and then they have a bit of a good time together, and then they realize that it was all a disaster to start with and they had to split up because Frankie didn't want to be in the UK, and so they go their separate ways, and then 6 months later they have another night out. They just can't stop. And I feel that's really harsh on Kieran Schumacher, who got a great tune out of this horse in the Pretty Polly in Ireland when he almost stole the race won by Blue Stocking, who would go and win the Arc. A lot of people thought Schumacher went too early that day, but actually, with the benefit of hindsight, as with so much in horse racing, what it showed was that it was an enterprising ride, almost allowed him to beat the Arc winner. She ran really well in the Vermeil behind the Arc 1-2. I'm not sure about her at this track, though, Peter. I might be wrong about this, but she's a great, big, gangly, quirky thing. And going around tight bends at Del Mar, look, it's either going to make her or she's going to hate it. I'm in the hate it camp, but that might be because I'm so biased about the jockey situation. So it's a hard one for me, but I don't fancy her.
I hear you about the jockey situation. I've done this whole write-up I was so proud of for our friends at AtTheRaces.com about Emily Upjohn and the filly and mare turf, and what a great story it was going to be to see Kieran Schumacher, justifying the connections, sticking with him, and then all of a sudden she's not in the race and he's not on her back. And
Pete, this jockey thing's crazy as well. They've done it with Inspiral. They took Schumacher off. They put Ryan all on. He was just as bad on Inspiral because it's not the jockey, it's the horse. Like, like 99 out of 100 in horse racing, it's the horse when you're dealing with these absolute elite athletes. It's ridiculous. But as I say, look, to be fair, there is some logic to this. The last jockey to win on Emily Upjohn was Frankie Dettori a long time ago now in the Coronation Cup, beat Westover, and that's pretty good form. Westover was close to around the best colt at the time. He ran well in the Arc de Triomphe against Ace Impact. You know, that was good form. And it's Dettori at the end of the day. I mean, look, I see it like this now. They've done Schumacher a favour because she's not going to win. If she got beat, everyone would say it was Schumacher's fault. So I think they've done him a favour. But it's Inspiral all over again. And how did that work out?
Let's talk about JRB. You mentioned the sharp turns being maybe a concern for Emily Upjohn. Based on the way this one got around, Chester, a tight left-handed course, wouldn't have been my first pick for him. Obviously, there are bits of form that fit here. Serious contender, this French-bred 3-year-old?
He's got the best draw. Stall 5, I think. He is the one horse who's drawn to perfection. Actually, probably Luxembourg as well. But certainly JRB, no excuses. Sean Levy travelling over. He arrived or arrives, depending on when you listen to this, on Wednesday. And he's looking forward to this horse. It's funny, isn't it? Brian Meehan. When it comes to Breeders' Cup runners, you might say in Europe, oh, it's Brian Meehan, we'll rule him out, against the elite. But when it comes to Breeders' Cup, he has a tremendous record. He won this race with Red Rocks and Dangerous Midge. And let's face it, Red Rocks and Dangerous Midge were not worldies in any ways whatsoever. This is an improving horse. And he won't be my fancy, but I would not be surprised at all if he ran really well, because there's nothing not to like about him. I think your point is a good one, though. He's quite a big horse, a bit sort of oaf-like round the bends. Will he be suited to Dalmar? I don't know. But then if a horse like Yabir could win a Breeders' Cup Turf, wherever it's run, it kind of makes you think you can overthink it sometimes.
You name-checked Luxembourg when talking about the good draws, looking at the USA morning line and seeing 12-1 on a Ryan Moore, Aidan O'Brien runner. That at least wants me to take a second look. Should I keep looking?
Well, he's a Coronation Cup winner, which, of course, Emily Upjohn is as well. The funny thing about Luxembourg is he won't be many people's fancy in this race, but he's absolutely one of those that if he won it, no one in the world would be surprised. Like, go back to his 2-year-old days. He won the Futurity at Doncaster. Now, that's the Derby trial, effectively, for 2-year-olds who might become Derby horses. He was sent off at 9-2 for the 2,000 guineas, and he finished 3rd in the 2,000 guineas. This has always been an absolute Group 1 horse from juvenile days to today. He's got it in him to run a big race. Is he better at a mile and a quarter or a mile and a half? In Europe, that's debatable. Around here, you'd say the trip is ideal. He'll go forward. He's a roughie. Well, when I say roughie, he's not really a roughie price, but he's a horse that, I'm just going to repeat myself. If he won, no one would be surprised in the least, although I find myself having not to select him.
Interesting. We got to talk about the other Aidan O'Brien runner in here, the filly Wingspan. Really seemed to take a new step up to a new level last time. Could it have been soft ground, or could she be a 3-year-old filly getting good late in the year? I think she could get a little lost in the USA betting here. I have half a mind to keep her in the mix. Am I nuts with Wingspan? Was it the ground last time, or could she be ready for a close-up?
First of all, that's probably the line of this podcast so far, isn't it? Nuts with Wingspan. I like what you've done there for Natali. That is why we miss you. Look, first of all, she's ditched by Ryan Moore. She's got a nasty draw. Everything makes it hard for Wingspan. It was a very good run against Kalpana. And let's not forget that Kalpana's performance has effectively retired the Art winner Blue Stocking, because I think if Kalpana hadn't won the Lemaire at Ascot on Champions Day, the chances are Blue Stocking would have remained in training. But now they think they've got an Art horse in Kalpana, so they don't need Blue Stocking anymore. Look, we're slightly repeating ourselves here. I mean, am I surprised if Wingspan goes and runs after a second at Ascot? No. Do I think she will win it? No. I think she'll be in the first 6. I don't fancy her to hit the frame.
Gotcha. First 6 isn't horrible, though. We might be able to work with that at the right price.
Oh,
Now, in the past,
people who've watched us before, Pete, will be delighted to get one in the first 6.
let's talk about the American contingent. In the past, we've come on here and talked about the turf, and you've told me there's absolutely no way any of these horses can make the frame. Do you have similarly negative views about this group of USA horses, or do you give any count to one like Far Bridge, who's won a couple of grade 1s on North American soil in a row and even turned away some Appleby runners?
Well, he's trained by Christophe Clement, so he's not at least trained really by an American, is he? So that gives him some sort of chance. You're absolutely right. Look good at Saratoga. Look good at Belmont at the Big A. I love that. Just the name is just so much better than the Belmont in the Big A. I love that. But realistically, I had this conversation actually with who did I have it with? I'm trying to think who I had this with. Anyway, I think it was Todd Pletcher about City of Troy and the Classic. I was saying, like, we just come to the turf races. We basically ignore you. Do you do the same when it comes to us in the dirt? And he said he didn't, but I could tell he did. But to answer your question, Farbridge, not for me.
Oh, that's very funny. Oh, quick word on the Japanese runners, then we'll get a word from our sponsor, and we'll come back with the verdict from you, Matt. Japanese go double-handed here. Do you see a contender in the bunch?
Well, if there is one, again, it's a bit like a Rebels Romance horse because Shahrir is a 6-year-old. I couldn't believe Shahrir was only 6. I mean, if he'd been 60, I'd have thought it was possible. He seems to have run in everything in just about every country, Dubai, obviously Japan, etc. He is a tough nut. He's in pretty good form. His second, it was quite some time ago now, but his second at Maidan to Rebels Romance was clearly a good run in the Dubai Shima Classic. And if you fancy Rebels Romance a little bit, well, you have to fancy Shahrir a little bit. And I don't think this is the best turf of all time. I mean, is this like a Falbrav, that kind of era of Breeders' Cup turfs? I don't think so. So I think Shahrir's in the mix. I don't really fancy Rousham Park, and most of the others I think are American, and we know those can't win.
I was waiting for that. Let's get a quick word from our sponsor, our friends over at Twin Spires. They're back in the handicapping contest game in a big way with the Kentucky Derby Betting Challenge returning. You can play in feeders and qualifiers very often over there. Go to twinspires.com, check the tournaments tab for all the information, and you can also play in the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge with our friends over at twinspires.com. Okay, now's the time. You've said positive things about a number of runners in here, but we're holding your feet to the fire. Who wins the turf?
Oh, firstly, I've got to say that absolutely do not play that competition because I could do with that 250 grand. And if I'm the only player, there's a chance I'll win it. So, no, it looks great. I'll be having a go myself. I'm going to keep this simple. I think the 2 old boys, Rebels Romance for the win, Shahrir for a place are the way to go here. As a bettor in races, Pete, and these types of races where you're dealing with top-class horses, none of these have been given sort of easy runs that you've been able to spot or whatever, although I think there are 1 or 2 at Breeders' Cup. Star of Mystery, for instance, I thought was given an absolute shocker stateside last time, runs in the sprint, and I think could go well at a price, but we're not going to preview that right now. I got off on a tangent already. But Rebels, Romance and Shahrir for me are the 2 against the field, which probably means that Emily Upjohn and Frankie will beat the Galloping Giraffe JRB.
You gave me a tangent. I'll give you one, or give you an opportunity for another one. The City of Troy win the Classic.
I'll be betting Sierra Leone each way, which I know a lot of people stateside will think I'm an idiot because the horse looks like a monkey, doesn't really put it in. In fact, I did message Coolmore a few weeks ago and I said, why don't you put Dutori on Sierra Leone? Because I feel that he might be a man who could sort that horse out. But the message back was that basically the trainer of the horse has the say on the jockey. But I did think Dutori on Sierra Leone in the Classic was an interesting way in for that horse. But I think he's massively overpriced. There's got to be a pace on in this Breeders' Cup Classic. There has to be a gallop. This horse keeps plodding on, and I think either doesn't want to win or is finding ways of getting beat. But in this Classic, if Fierceness and if City of Troy gets out, they are going to go hard. And it might just allow Sierra Leone to fall in. So again, to answer your question, Pete, I mean, no one in the world doesn't want City of Troy to win this race, I don't think. But am I going to select City of Troy? Well, that's different because the head and the heart are different in this game. My heart wants City of Troy. My head says have an each-way bet on Sierra Leone.
Great stuff, Matt, as ever. Have fun out there.